Every day of my life, if I wanted to, I could wake up and I could find all the stolen cars in my life, all the things that are stacked against me. None of you can do everything, but all of you can do something. And I hope that you will develop just kind of a grit and a determination to keep going. I can look back now and just feel so blessed in my life because of just saying yes to an opportunity here, an opportunity here. 1 hour alone is in thy hands, the now on which the shadow stands. It kind of told me that all I had was the now. The journey has been so rewarding because it's been difficult and because it's been hard. Born and raised St. George. In the middle of my senior year, the head coach of the football team, the head coach of the baseball team, they came and met with me and said, hey, we would love to have you come play football. This was at Dixie, which was a junior college, and I was excited to do that because they were offering me the opportunity to be able to still play both sports. And I loved both sports. And I signed this letter of intent, and 2 weeks later, I jumped in my dad's truck and I headed up I-15. My girlfriend, Jennifer Orton, she, the Lynn's Marketplace, the grocery store here in Cedar. Lynn is my wife's grandfather, and he started Lynn's, and then my wife's father and his brothers owned and operated that. Well, Jennifer would dance for our drill team, and it was state drill team competition, high school competition. She was going to be up in Springville. That's where the state competition was being held. And I jumped in my dad's truck early that Saturday morning. I was going to head up, hook up with her family there, watch the competition, and then Jen was going to drive home with me that night. But to make a long story short here, I'm going to come back to a couple things about this, but I fell asleep at the wheel, and I woke up a fraction of a second before my truck had completely gone off the road. So when I woke up, the right side of my truck was off the road. The truck was shaking like crazy. That, I'm sure, is what woke me up. My heart almost jumped out of my chest as I reached for the wheel in an effort to pull the truck back onto the road. But before I could even make any attempt at all, the left tire, so the right side was already off the road, the left tire hit a guardrail, and it just kind of sent the truck up in the air, upside down. And I'll just be honest, I just said a quick prayer in my mind. I just said, please let everything be okay. And then the truck landed upside down. The roof caved in. I broke my neck and became a quadriplegic. I'm going to come back to that, but I have to just say, as I was in that truck driving up I-15, I was kind of contemplating about how life was just going along, just how I had hoped. And I was excited about my future. I just signed this letter to play football. I had planned to serve a mission for my church. I thought Jennifer was awesome. I hoped that I would leave and come back 2 years later and she'd still be available. I knew that would be tough because all these guys were going to descend on her door as soon as I left. But that was kind of like what if I had a perfect plan, that was it. And then bam, my plan didn't go the way I had hoped. And I woke up, I was life-flighted. I was rushed into the Fillmore Hospital, and then I was life-flighted up to the LDS Hospital in Salt Lake City and had surgery that day. I woke up, so that was Saturday. I woke up on Sunday morning staring at the ceiling, wondering, what am I going to do? What does the future have in store for me now? And my teachers throughout high school, they'd always tell my parents or me, they'd say, he's a smart kid now. If he would just apply himself, he'd do really well as a student. And I did okay as a high school student, but my thoughts were elsewhere. If I had free time, I wasn't hitting the books real hard. And after my accident, that was kind of became my new playing field, I guess, if you will. And Jennifer and we kept dating. And we kept dating, and as I was going through school, they honored the scholarship there at Dixie, but it was a junior college, and I finished there and had the opportunity to come through the business program here at SUU. So I'm an alum of SUU, got my business degree here. While I was in school, I had a little bit of money that I had invested with a company called Shearson Lehman Brothers, but with a guy named Lon Henderson. So when I got asked to speak here, and I found out this was like for the entrepreneur class, and I was saying that last night, my wife's like, you are not saying that right. So if I'm not saying that right, you guys can forgive me. But I was like, I don't feel like I'm much of an entrepreneur, but I do feel like I am part of a great entrepreneurial story, because I had this money invested at Shearson, and I would call Lon. My dad was a business owner in St. George. They had started an electrical company called Wilkinson Electric, and introduced me to Lon. I called him all the time, and one day I called him. He said, "How would you like to come work for me?" And I thought he meant at Shearson Lehman. That's like a Merrill Lynch. Shearson became Solomon Smith Barney, and I think Solomon Smith Barney got bought by Bank of America. So the finance arm of Bank of America is where he got his start. Well, back then, these companies were just starting. The registered investment advisory business was just starting. When he said, "Come work for me," I thought he meant at Shearson, but it was to go start working at a company, a small little company called Sulttus, or it was called Smith Henderson and Associates, and we later changed the name to Sulttus Investment Advisors. So I was maybe the fourth guy hired at Sulttus in 1993, and so why I say I wasn't an entrepreneur, maybe more of an intrapreneur within that company, and that company has allowed me to wear a lot of hats in my life. And so after I graduated from SUU, I worked in operations. I was a trader. I did all the trading for all of our client accounts. And then after I was out of operations, I was an investment advisor. And then I literally got out my wedding list, and I would just call people and say, "Hey, I'd like to introduce you to Sulttus and what we do. We thought we had something special at Sulttus." I won't go on too long, but I will just say that Sulttus, maybe we started managing a couple $100 million. Probably, I don't even know if we started managing $100 million. And it took us a long time to get to our first $1 billion. And I think over the first 10 years, we probably got maybe to $1 billion. And then over the next 5 or 6 years, $2 billion, $3 billion. I became, along this path, I became our CFO, I became our chief compliance officer, and I still worked with 150 clients of my own, which was around $100 million of assets of individual clients that I worked with. And then just this last year, 2024, we had a capital partner come in and buy equity into Sulttus. We wanted to keep the name Sulttus, and we wanted to be able to perpetuate our brand. The Steve Harrop investment building, or the Steve Harrop Hall or investment center that you guys have across the street, Steve was a money manager that we found out in Wisconsin. He worked for a company called Strong Capital Management. And Steve was an unbelievable money manager. And we had him come out and speak to our clients years ago. And he came out here and he said, "Man, this is a great place. I might want to live here." And he ended up moving out, subleasing from Sulttus. And retired from money management and came and became a professor here at SUU. Our CEO at Sulttus now, with this transaction that happened a couple of years ago, I got rid of the CFO hat and the chief compliance hat, and my life is maybe a little, I have a little more control over my calendar these days. But our CEO, Clark Taylor, graduated from SUU in the finance program here, the business program, business and finance program. Our president, Tyler Finlinson, came through SUU, and we have, probably at least 15 employees. When I became our CFO, we had maybe 20 employees, and just 2 years ago when I handed that off, we had about 110 employees. I think we have 130 employees today, and I suspect we'll have a couple hundred employees over the next 2 or 3 years. So that's a little bit of the background of maybe my business background, but I also want to come back to this maybe to this story here, where when I woke up staring at the ceiling after my accident, I had a halo brace. It was drilled into my head in 4 places, so I couldn't move there. I wasn't able to speak. I had a tube that went up my nose, down through my throat, into my lungs to help me breathe, because I didn't have enough upper body muscles to breathe. Fortunately, over time, my upper chest muscles started working, and I was able to start breathing on my own. We got rid of the ventilator, but I'll just say this: I was looking out at a world that was now filled with just massive amounts of uncertainty, and I didn't know if I was ever going to be able to, at first be able to breathe by myself again. What about being able to feed myself again? For a long time, people would come into my hospital room, and they would help me eat because I couldn't reach up and touch my face. But over time, at first they had these little bungee cords that would hold my elbow up. I remember they strapped a fork on my hand, and the first time I tried this, I had a banana, and I just swung it over to my face, and I stabbed my forehead, and I thought, I didn't know if these guys were too professional or not. I was like, I don't know if you should give me a fork. But a lot of people wondered, what's going to happen with Tyler and Jennifer? We were like a thing in high school, but there was nothing ever written in stone that we were going to get married. But as it turned out, she and I kept dating for the 3 years after, and we got married. And I tell this story a lot. This lady came up to Jennifer's sister, Natalie, right after we were married, and she said, gosh, we wondered what was going to happen with those two. And, I don't want to get too personal or anything, but just, how are they doing? And Natalie was like 18 or 19. She goes, well, they're doing fine. They're excited. They just got married. They're happy. They're in a new place. I don't know what else you want to know. And she goes, well, listen, I don't want to get too personal, but, are they planning on having children? And Natalie was like, I think they would like to. They really haven't consulted with me about that, but I think they'd like to. And she goes, gosh, that's great, but listen, I don't want to get too personal, but now, if they have kids, won't their kids be paralyzed? And I know you guys are going, what a dumb question. And I know there's a few of you out there going, well, do you have kids? And are they paralyzed? And Natalie said that to us, and we're like, no, that's crazy. But then we got kind of scared, and we decided we better wait till we could afford to buy a couple of wheelchairs just in case. And so after that, I always pictured the Wilkinson family like a little family of ducks. Papa Duck in my big chair, because back then I was in a manual chair, and I'd push this chair, and I always picture my little kids. We were at the mall, and it looked like a bunch of ducks on a pond, and my kids with their little short arms, just pushing away, like, wait up, Dad. And I could see people trying not to make eye contact with us, like, oh man, there is a sad story there. It's the paralyzed family. But I know that kind of sounds dumb, but before my accident, I didn't know what went along with being paralyzed. I knew that there were quadriplegics, and I knew that there were paraplegics. And I thought that quadriplegics couldn't move anything from their neck down, and I thought that paraplegics couldn't move anything from their waist down. Well, I know a lot more now, and I want to get credit for being a quadriplegic. I'm going to give you guys a couple of examples of what I can or can't do. So when people first see me, my shoulders, work pretty well. My biceps work pretty well. But here are my 3 biggest physical challenges. First is I lost the use of my fingers. And so if I hold my hands still, I can't wiggle my fingers. And so the reason that was the biggest challenge was It was all the little things, like just that I took for granted, like just being able to pick up a pencil, button up my shirt, get dressed. All those little things weren't little things anymore. I had to start really thinking about it. Second biggest challenge, I lost my use of my triceps. So like I said, my shoulders were working my arms, but if I lock my elbow and I come up, I get about right there, and then my arm falls. And obviously the reason that's a challenge for somebody in a wheelchair is those triceps. Those are the muscles you would normally use to push a wheelchair with. So just pushing my chair on thick carpet was like really pretty tough. And it was really tough. I couldn't lift myself up to transfer into bed or to get out of bed back in my chair. The third biggest challenge, and you wouldn't recognize it, I already mentioned it, but as I talk to you guys, if I reach out with my right arm, I just kind of casually put my left arm back. Or if I reach out this way, I have to counterbalance everything I do because my stomach muscles don't work or my back. So if I leave my arm into my side here and I go like this, I'll just fall that way. If I reach out forward, I can fall forward. It's only been in the last maybe 10 years. It's been like almost 35 years since my accident. And about the last 10, I've been in a power chair. But so I wanted to share kind of my physical limitations with you. I'm going to just share one quick story with you. And then I do want to have time for questions and answers at the end. But for the first 8 years after my accident, I wasn't able to drive. And so everywhere I went, school up here to SUU, somebody would drive me up. The professors came down to Utah Tech's campus back then at night, and I took a lot of my classes there. But occasionally, so the first 8 years, everywhere I went, someone took me. And I got asked to speak to a youth group down in Las Vegas. And then after this, and then I was also asked to speak at a corporate event on the next day in California. So I was going to go down, speak, stay at a friend's house in Las Vegas, and then fly out to California the next day. So a buddy of mine, Ryan, he's driving us down. We're in my wheelchair accessible van. You hit a button on your keychain, door opens up, ramp comes out. My chair locks in to the passenger side. He drives, we get down there, I speak to this youth group. Then we're going to go back to a friend of mine, Sean's house, and wait for spend the night. But Sean says, let's just don't go to my house right now. Let's go do something fun. Well, I go, well, you live here. What do you have in mind? And this was right after the Stratosphere had been built. And you all know what the Stratosphere is in Vegas, that big tall tower. And up on top of that tower, there are a couple of amusement rides. There's like a roller coaster, and you can bungee jump, I guess, off it now. But there was a Big Shot. That's one of those rides where you get locked, you strap in a seat with 16 people, 4 on each side. They stretch out the bungee cords or hydraulic cables, and you sit there, and then they launch you up into the stratosphere, and that's supposed to be like really fun. Well, I hadn't done anything like that since my accident, and so I didn't know if I even could. I was kind of nervous, but I'm like, well, let's go give it a shot. So we go down there, we park the van, we get up into the observatory. I'm not really afraid of heights, but this is up here, so it adds to the excitement, I guess. And we go and we get in the back of the line. We're just waiting our turn, and a guy sees me in my chair, and he comes and goes, oh, hey, you don't have to wait in line, and he starts to escort me to the front. And at the time, I felt really uncomfortable about this special treatment. I have gotten over that. I will take it any day. In fact, I don't want to digress too far, but a few years later, we went to Disneyland. I was with my wife's family, and for the first half of that trip, I had never felt so loved in my life. And for the last half of the trip, I had never felt so used. It was like you're coming with us. But the party at Disneyland ended for us wheelchair guys when all the wheelchairs that said Disneyland on the back of them, and I was like, come on, man. Never mind. That's a whole different thing. I'm gonna really digress there. But I don't know what's going to happen. So this guy takes me to the front of the line, and I'm watching to see if there's anything special that I'm going to have to do. Well, as I'm going to the front of the line, I see people and I feel like kind of bad. And I'm wondering if they're going to be upset. And they look at me and they're like, oh, and I notice their expression kind of be like, hey, and then they look at me and they go, oh, hey, this could be interesting. Let's see what happens to this guy. And so I'm like, well, I don't know. Well, we get up there and I notice that everybody that gets in their seat, they pull these shoulder straps over and you hang on to handles for stability. Well, I'm not going to be able to hang on to the handles for stability. So I think I got that worked out. I go, all right, Ryan, it's our turn. Ryan picks me up. He sets me 2 seats over, pulls the shoulder straps down, locks it down. And I go, okay, Ryan, you're going to sit here on this side. Sean, you're on the left. You guys, I want you guys to sit on either side. I'm going to put my arms out. You guys lean back against my arms, and that's going to give me stability. And they're like, all right, man, we got you. And I'm like, okay. And I go, guys, I don't want to look too crazy, which I think that probably passed. But I go, all right, you take your left leg, Ryan, wrap it around my right ankle. Sean, you take your left leg, you wrap it around you take your right leg, wrap it around my left ankle. So I wrapped their legs around my legs, my arms are behind their back. And for better or for worse, we got the side that was facing everybody in line. So everybody in line is like staring at me like, hey, this should be interesting. And I'm staring back going, we're going to find out. And they raise you up so your feet are a couple of feet off the ground. And it's not music, but it's like a rocket engine that's going to launch. And you're sitting there and you don't know when. That's part of the fun, I guess. And then, boom. And we're now launching. And you guys have all done this, I'm sure, most of you. But at this point, I realized and remembered my body does not regulate blood pressure the way a normal person does. Like if you've ever laid down and you get up real fast and got lightheaded, it's called an autonomic nervous system that kicks in, your heart beats harder, pumps blood up to your brain, and you regulate. Well, my body doesn't do that. And now we're accelerating and all the blood is leaving my head. And as it's leaving my head, everything's starting to turn black. So it's turning black from the outside. It's getting black, black, black. And right before the lights go totally out, we hit the top. So we hit the top. There's just this little sliver of light. And then we start to fall. And as we start to free fall, I'm thinking, this is great. You know, the blood's coming back to my head. But then I realized that my friends apparently had adopted the every man for himself policy because my arms were not behind their back. And I was like, I don't know if I can recreate it, but I was trying to grab hold of stuff. I couldn't. I was falling to the right. And then we picked up more speed, and I realized they didn't do any part of their job because as we're really picking up speed, all of a sudden I look out, and here comes my toes out in front of me. And then it's my kneecaps, and I'm like slouched way down, and I'm looking up at my feet. Well, then we hit the bottom again, and we hit the bottom, and then we bounce back up. And we go back up, and we start to free fall again. And here comes my legs floating up again. And this happens like 3 or 4 times. So at least I think you've kind of got a visual there. Well, we get down to the bottom, and there's 2 kinds of people down in line now. Half of them are like, okay, just don't make eye contact with them. Like, we were looking over here, and I'm going, I know you saw, so you don't have to act like you didn't. And then there's the other half that they don't care. And I remember one guy laughing, he yelled out, man, you should have seen your legs. And I remember yelling back, hey, buddy, that's all I could see. And then I said to Ryan, I go, Ryan, let's get out of here. And Ryan and Sean are both like, no, let's stop and look at the photos. And I'm like, we are not looking at the photos. We're getting out of here. Well, we go out, we get on the elevator. And to be honest, lots of adrenaline. Like, that was fun. Like, I was like, okay, that's great. I'm not doing it again right now. But that was pretty cool. And at least for me, that was like the start of some other fun things that I've done. But we come out into the parking garage, and somebody had stolen my van. And the police came, they drove around the parking lot everywhere. They came back, and they're like, it is definitely gone. Well, that was not great because like our luggage was there. Life was going to be really inconvenient for me and for my family, people that were going to have to like pick me up, put me in a car, you know, put my chair in. And that was going to be that way for the next 3 months or so because back then we're going to have to buy a new van and get it converted. And I was pretty discouraged about it. And Sean's brother picked us up. We went back to Sean's house. I got in bed that night, and I was looking up at the ceiling. And I remember thinking, I can't believe somebody stole my car. And then I thought, man, that ride was awesome. And then I thought, I can't believe somebody stole my car. And then I thought, man, that ride was awesome. And it was crazy because in like this 5-minute stretch, and this is how life is. 1 minute, everything was just like awesome and everything was going great. And the next minute, boom, I felt like I'd been kicked in the stomach. And I realized that, I guess I share the story because every day of my life, if I wanted to, I could wake up and I could find all the stolen cars in my life, all the hardships, all the difficulties, all the things that are, stacked against me. And I'll share, when I grew up thinking about getting married, I thought about, picking my new bride up and walking across the threshold of our, wherever it was, our honeymoon suite or our house or wherever it was. I didn't picture her like popping a wheelie and, popping across the threshold. Or I pictured long walks on the beach and, we don't walk on the beach. I thought about throwing the baseball around or the football around with kids. And a lot of those things didn't turn out the way I had planned. But I also know that every day of my life I can wake up and I can find all of the wonderful rides, all of the blessings that I've had in my life, and all of the opportunities that have opened up because as I was thinking about your guys' lives here at SUU, and as you guys look out into the world, especially right now, all you hear about is, you're not even going to be needed because AI is going to already solve for everything. And you're going to get an education and you're not going to have, AI is going to replace everything and there's all this disruption. Well, I can tell you that, when I got paralyzed, that was a lot of disruption. And just having to go to school and work my way through it and try to be the kind of person that somebody like Jennifer would still be interested in. The journey has been so rewarding, and it's been rewarding because it's been difficult, and because it's been hard, and because lots and lots of changes in our industry over the years. But one last story, and if that I'll share is so I mentioned that I kind of pictured how life would be having kids, and it didn't turn out the way I had thought. Well, so instead, I remember my 4-year-old son, he was sitting on my lap, and I was reading a story to him. And the way I read is, the way I turn pages is I just lick my pinky finger or knuckle, and the page sticks, and I turn the page. So I'm sitting there, and I go to turn the page, and it slips. So I lick my finger again, and it slips again. And I go a third time, and it slips a third time. And my 4-year-old, he looks up at me, and he says, "You can't do anything." And I don't know how to handle this, right? I want to, part of me wants to start bawling, like, you are right. I can't do anything. I am worthless. And I'm sitting there, and I know I didn't handle it the right way. I look down at my 4-year-old, and I go, "I can read. Can you read?" And he goes, "No." I go, "All right, how about this?" I go, "How about you turn the pages and I read?" And he thought, "Hey, that makes sense, Dad." So that's how we did it. And, he was wrong about the fact that I couldn't do anything. I could do a few things. And in fact, over the years, I was able to do a few things like really, really well. And there were a couple other guys at Sulttus that could do some things that I couldn't do, but they could do them really, really well. And, none of you can do everything, but all of you can do something. And I hope that you will develop, the ability to do something really well. And probably the greatest characteristic that you can maybe develop in your life is just kind of a grit and a determination to keep going. Because I can just tell you that at first, just being able to reach up and scratch my face, being able to get a job and to get married and to have a family just seemed like almost things that were out of my reach, but just step by step by step. I can tell you now that, it's been 30-something, along that way, so that morning that I got paralyzed, when I left St. George, I had been voted by my classmates as the most outstanding athlete in my school. And the next time I saw them was high school graduation, where they'd asked me to be the keynote speaker. And I saw quite a few of them, because the whole town traveled to Salt Lake, where I was at in rehab. Just this outpouring of love for me. And I just knew. So when the student body president came and said, "Hey, would you be the keynote speaker at graduation?" I wanted to say no so badly. I was scared to death. Like I said, when I left St. George, I was voted the most outstanding athlete, and the next time I was going to see them, I could barely hold a fork or sit up in a wheelchair without falling over. So it was a huge social change for me too, right? I was trying to change physically, but also, or adapt to my physical limitations, but also socially it was very, very difficult. And so, but I said yes. It was a way for me to say thank you for all the love and support I had been receiving. And so I spoke. I think I did a terrible job, but then somebody else asked me to speak, and I said, okay, yes. And then somebody else, and then somebody else, and somebody else. And then a guy came and said, gosh, we want to make this documentary out of you and out of your life. And I was like, I don't think I was scared to do that. And we did that, and Steve Young narrated it. And little doors opened here, door opened here, door opened here. Lon Henderson, how would you like to come work for me? Yeah, I would like that. When I got asked by him to come work for him, he goes, how well do you know Excel? And this was back when we still used DOS. It was before Windows. And Windows had just come out. My parents bought a computer with Windows. I signed up for an Excel class at Dixie Junior College and started learning that while I was on the job at Sulttus. And I can look back now and just feel so blessed in my life because of just saying yes to an opportunity here, an opportunity here. I don't know what the future is going to look like for you guys. I do know it's going to be full of opportunities, and I know it's going to be full of challenges. And I just hope that you will be able to walk through those doors of opportunity and just keep persevering. And I wish you every success. I know you can be successful in your lives, and you'll have, I think, more joy and happiness in your life if you spend more time focusing on the wonderful rides and blessings in your life, and learning from the stolen cars and from the challenges and things. And with that, I just want to say thank you. And if you guys have questions or anything like that, I'm happy to entertain them. But I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you guys today. All right, please don't be shy. By the way, none of our kids are paralyzed. We have 5 kids. None of them are paralyzed. And many, many times I wished, like when we were in church, I wished they were paralyzed. Somebody had a question. 5 kids. We had 3. They're all graduated and out of high school. I've got a daughter who's on a mission, but she's coming back to go to BYU. I've got a son going to Utah Tech, another son who's becoming an electrician. And then we waited a few years and said, let's have one more. And we got 2 more, a boy and a girl, twins. They're freshmen in high school. So life it's been so fun.
Will you be staying after for that lunch thing that they do at the top?
I might be. I think I'm invited, so I'll hang around. My wife she drove up. Oh, but yeah, so it did work out. Jen and I did get married, by the way, and we have 5 kids. And in fact, I was coming up here to take a test, and she was pushing my chair along. We had a fun memory as we pulled in today. I said, "Hey, Jen, do you remember when you were pushing me along the sidewalk over there, and then you hit that bump, and I went flying out of my chair and landed on the ground?" And she got kind of mad. She was like, "Yeah, I remember it. I wish you would stop holding that over me." But anyway, she's unbelievable. She's awesome. I thought somebody was going to ask me if I got my van back, but will somebody ask me that?
I had a different question.
No, go ahead.
What helped you to find the motivation to keep going, both through the personal and through the business stuff?
Well, I hoped that like a personal drive inside to like say, I've got to keep pushing. But if I'm being 100% honest, like Jennifer was a huge part of that motivation. She was just awesome. And again, there was nothing written in stone that we were going to get married. And even if it hadn't been us, I knew that I needed to keep working and become. I knew I had been blessed with, I felt like, good talents and abilities that besides physical, and I just felt like I needed to try to work hard and multiply those as best I could and see how well I could do. That's a great question. We got it back like 3 days later, but the reason I wanted you to ask that, in fact, yes, we got it back 3 days later, and the way you had started was with like long-nose pliers, because they had busted out the ignition switch, and then you could just start it with pliers. And I was driving up to SUU to take some tests, and we got on the Black Ridge, and the transmission fell out. So apparently they've done joyride. Now, I mean, this was a wheelchair-accessible van, and they took it joyriding. I don't know if that's possible. But it was funny, because it was like 5 years later, I got asked to speak at a prison here in Cedar City. So I got it was for a church group, but I was asked to speak at the prison, and so all these prisoners come down to hear me speak, and I was telling this story, and I said, yeah, I come down off the elevator, I go out into the parking lot, and somebody stole my car, and I said, what kind of lowlife would steal it? And then I realized who I was talking to, and I was like, oh, crap. And I stopped for a minute, and then it got kind of quiet, and then one guy said, hey, I stole somebody else's car, but not even I would steal a wheelchair-accessible van. That is pretty low. And I was like, you got to draw the line somewhere. I'm glad you've got some standards. But that was fun, because I've probably now had the opportunity to speak way over 1,000 times in my life. And that's been something that's become kind of real, I don't know, like sort of fun for me, but it helped me, I don't know, serve, but also it's been such a great thing just for me and Jennifer for a long time. Before we had kids, we were going like all over the country and speaking at different things, and it was a lot of fun. Any other questions? I think, yeah.
What got you through the harder days when, after your accident and everything was fresh, and you had your good days and your not so good days?
Yeah. Maybe I'll just share, like, I thought I was going to work harder than any person that they had ever seen. Because they told me, look, you're paralyzed, you'll never be able to, you might be on a ventilator the rest of your life, you're never going to be able to walk again and all this. And I said, you don't know me. And I was going to work so hard, and I was going to, I knew I probably wouldn't be out on the football field again because I had broke my neck. And, I would be totally remiss if I didn't talk about, faith in my life. I mean, my faith was a huge foundation, and I had some pretty neat spiritual experiences through a lot of this hardship. But at the same time, that didn't mean that everything just was easy. It was still really hard. And I remember my physical therapist would come in and he'd hold my hand off the bed, and he'd let go and say, see if you can hold it up, and it would just fall. And this went on day after day. And I was trying to say, tomorrow, he would say, that's okay, tomorrow's going to be better. But then tomorrow wasn't better. And then the next day wasn't better. And I started getting pretty discouraged and like, how much better can it be? Like, maybe I'll be able to hold my hand off the bed, but I mean, that's not going to help me do anything. So, and I don't know if there's this poem that a guy shared with me, and it just says, it's on a sundial at a college, I think Wesley College, back east, but as the sun comes up and moves across the sky, this shadow moves across the sundial. And it said, the shadow by my finger cast divides the future from the past. Behind its unreturning line, the forgotten hour no longer thine. Before it lies the unknown hour in darkness and beyond thy power. 1 hour alone is in thy hands, the now on which the shadow stands. And so it kind of told me that, hey, it's great to be able to look back at some awesome, time on a football field and in a wrestling room and on a baseball field. I learned some things there. Even though I couldn't still do those things helped me become who I was. And I wanted to get out of that hospital, and I wanted to get an education, and I wanted to get a job, and I wanted to get married. But those things felt like a year away, 4 years away, 10 years away. And all I had was the now on which the shadow stands. And so I just said, let me just try and do my best today. And it was nice, though, to be able to look back a year later and go, man, I've come a long way. I still got a long way to go, but I've come a long way. And even today, it's been 30-something years since my accident, and now I'm going through another transition at Sulttus. I mean, with this transaction, it's, you might think of it as something like, oh man, life's so wonderful now, and I have lots of options and probably don't have to, go back to Sulttus if I didn't want to. I'm still work there every day, but my role's totally changed, and it's kind of, I'm in a little weird spot. But I know that I have to just keep pushing, and now I have an opportunity to grow in maybe some other areas. But I don't know if that answered your question, but I think it was just day by day, bit by bit, and trying to do a little better today than I did the day before.
How do you find those skills that you had developed?
Well, at first, it was just like I was taking general classes and working hard and seeing if I could get all A's. And in fact, that actually started boosting my confidence also. That kind of became my new football field, sort of. And I just would work really hard and not to get too, I don't want to sound arrogant, but when I got the, what's it called, the Student of the Year, when I graduated from SUU, I graduated with the highest GPA in my business class, and that wasn't like that didn't mean like I was but it was kind of, I don't know if it was even a goal. I just wanted to do as good as I could. But it helped me feel like, hey, I can do hard things. I can do hard things. And that's, you guys are in school. Work hard. You can do hard things. We can all do hard things. In fact, you can do a lot harder things than you think you can. That was, when does this end? About like 3 more minutes? When we filmed this video, I did not name it, by the way. It's called Tyler, a Real Hero. You can actually look it up on YouTube, and it's, but Steve Young narrates it. So we flew down to meet with Steve Young, and this was, in fact, this morning I was just watching Rise with the 49ers, but Steve had just been named the MVP the year before, and now I fly down to film this documentary with him. And we met at a junior college, and he was walking across the football field, and I loved Steve Young. Barry Sanders was my favorite, but he goes, we're talking, and as he got close, I was like, how in the world is this guy the MVP of the NFL? He was like 6 feet tall, didn't look like this superhuman, and I went back and learned a lot about his life, where he started out as like the 6th string quarterback at BYU, and like literally, and ultimately stuck to it. They wanted him to become a running back or play defense, and he's like, no, I want to be a quarterback. And that was pretty cool. And in fact, Steve asked me, who's your favorite player? I was diplomatic. I said, well, other than you, Barry. And he's like, you got to come down and watch the first, Monday Night Football. The Lions are coming to play us. And we went and did all that, and it was a blast. But Steve, it was 8th string quarterback. In fact, there's this, if you read his story, he was like, we can do hard things. He didn't start out as the MVP. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for having me, and good luck to all of you in your school and your studies and in your careers. I wish you every success.